All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Living the Dream podcast. Today on the show, we have Marvin L. Storm, who is an exit strategist and host of the Business Exit Stories podcast. Marvin, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to our chat today.
I am too. So we like to jump right in. If you could start with just telling us a little bit about yourself, some of the things that you like to do for fun, that'd be great.
Well, after I sold my business a while back. I lived down in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I pulled up stakes and headed for the hills, as they say. I live in a remote area in Northern California on the way up to Lake Tahoe, for those of you that are familiar with the Northern California geography. I live not too far, actually, from where the fires started this fall and kind of burned their way up toward Lake Tahoe. So it was kind of smoky for a few weeks there, but with the rains that came in the last few weeks, all those fires are extinguished now. But I moved up here, and I do a lot of hiking and skiing. So that was kind of the plan, that I would move a little bit closer to the ski resorts. And I don't spend as much time as I thought I would be. I only live about an hour, from being on the slopes. I thought I would be spending more time, but I guess getting a little bit older, I'm a little bit more cautious of taking those black diamond runs, and kind of look for the easy slopes nowadays.
Gotcha. I've never been skiing, and I'm not a fan of the cold, so I don't know if I will go.
Well, your age, you wouldn't really go skiing nowadays. You'd go snowboarding, so that's what your generation would probably do. But for my generation, it was, too thin skis that you kind of floated down the hill on. So I kind of stand in amazement sometime as the snowboarders come flying by and go airborne and, do 360s and those type of things. A little bit more challenging and, difficult than I want to try it on myself nowadays.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I get that. Well, tell us a little bit about being an exit strategist and your podcast and what it's about.
Well, as I said, I've spent most of my career being involved in growing a business, scaling a business at one level or another. I got my degree in accounting and thought that's where I would spend most of my time, was working my way up the public accounting ladder, eventually perhaps becoming a partner in an accounting firm. But after doing that for a couple of years, I was actually playing pickup basketball. I had a game every Tuesday night, and we spent a couple hours on the court, and the same guys, and occasionally, and we'd have some guys join us. And one of those guys that joined us once was someone that I became very good friends with. And over the year or two that we played basketball, we started talking about our careers and what we like to do, and kind of our hopes, aspirations, and dreams. Maybe someday going out and starting a business and sailing our own ship and making our own way. And eventually we got all jacked up, and before we knew it, we were turning in our resignations and renting some office space in a high rise in downtown, and about 300 square feet. And we got a couple of desks and some phones. And before we knew it, we were in business. I can just close my eyes now and see my partner and myself sitting on butcher block desks that faced each other with our phones. And we were in business, and we grew that business over a period of about 8 to 9 years. We ended up having almost 2 full floors of an office building in downtown, and had 50, 60 people working for us, and it was an exciting time. We just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I was kind of young at the time, and really thought that I had the Midas touch, and that I was a little bit smarter than the average guy, and started believing some of my press clippings, because we were doing very well, and until we didn't. And the economy changed, and I was involved in the leasing business at the time, and some of the tax laws changed. And it was all of a sudden, what used to come easy of customers and clients that would make their way to our business and sign up, all of a sudden weren't as frequent. Kind of got skinny there for a while. But as entrepreneurs do, we were able to figure it out, and eventually was able, as I said, to continue to grow the business, and it turned out pretty well. And from there, my partner and I, we kind of, after being together for so long, my objectives, he's a little bit older than I was and a little bit different point in his career. And I kind of wanted to go continue scaling the business, and he kind of wanted to go in a little bit different direction. And before we knew it, we had met at a, park bench in the city park, and we sat down for an afternoon and talked about what our goals and aspirations and dreams were and how they had changed, and a little bit about our thoughts and ideas at the time. And we agreed that it was time to exit the business. That was really my first exit and stepping away from a business that we had built. And I kind of went right and he kind of went left. And we're still great friends today, managed that relationship over time. But I took a little bit different tact and, launched another business after that as he did. And which ended up into, kind of evolving into this last exit I had a few years ago, and where I thought I would just, kind of do what everyone wants to do, have a successful career and eventually get to a point where you can kind of hang it up and, move to the country and take it easy. And that's kind of what I did. That was the plan. And but after spending so many years in the fast lane, kind of with the pedal to the metal, being in the slow lane wasn't all that exciting. You get so used to being involved and busy and facing challenges on a day-to-day basis, and all of a sudden having not a lot to do. And as I said, being in the slow lane, and in some cases even pulled over from the slow lane and parked on the side of the road. It just got kind of boring, actually. And so I got a little bit reflective on, my career and how I had exited businesses. And this last exit I was involved in, if I would have been, because of the scale of the exit, if I had have been a little bit more dialed in on what I should have been doing and how that transaction sort of unfolded, if I had kind of understood some of the rules of the game at that level, I could have probably done a little bit better for myself. So I just got to thinking, I love podcasting. I listen to podcasts all the time. And so I said, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. And that's what I did. And instead of interviewing actual entrepreneurs that exited their business or sold them, I took a little bit different tact. I decided that I would interview the deal makers, the people that actually put the transactions together and helped entrepreneurs exit their business. And these are, the mergers and acquisition advisors, the CPAs, attorneys, the wealth managers, investment bankers, business brokers, these people that are involved in facilitating a sales transaction when an entrepreneur steps away from his business. And I thought I would have them bring their stories to the podcast and share the good ones, share the transactions that didn't turn out all that well, and some real tragic, sad stories actually of how people, after working decades, on that last lap, just before they're getting ready to exit and sell their business, they drop the baton and they kind of mess it up, and they don't get what they thought they were going to get out of the business. And sometimes it can dramatically impact a person's retirement or cash or resources, financial resources they have to kind of start their next thing or whatever the circumstances are. But they dropped the baton on that last lap, and it really doesn't have to happen. And that's kind of what the podcast is all about, is sharing the takeaways from transactions that went well and transactions that didn't go very well. And anyone that has a business actually should really listen to a podcast, something like this, because it has so many nuggets of information and insight on things that you should be doing, things that and things that you should not be doing. when it comes to positioning all those years and sometimes decades and often lifetime of hard work, and being able to optimize the value of all that hard work and when it comes to selling your business. And so I just really thoroughly enjoy the whole experience of talking to these advisors, and I get tremendous feedback from the audience that listens to it. I had a guy not too long ago, message me and say, "Hey, I'm sure glad I listened to this episode because this guy, the guy on the episode sounded a lot like me. And I certainly don't want to end up like he did. I'm not going to make the same mistakes he did. And that's quite frankly, that's the reason that I'm doing the podcast, is that you can learn from other people's experiences. So you don't have to make those mistakes and left turns when you should have turned right. So it's been very gratifying and rewarding, kind of give back and share some of the insights of people that have been down that road before. And so those that haven't don't have to experience all the pain and grief of making mistakes they shouldn't really make.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Tell us a little bit more about your vision for the podcast. Is there a specific number of people you're trying to help, a size you're trying to get to, or just continue doing it for the enjoyment of helping people?
No, I think it's a great question. One of the things that I thought would really kind of unfold as I, built an audience was that I would, probably target entrepreneurs that were kind of late in their career. That would be who would generally be interested in the podcast. And while there's certainly a large number of people and an audience that fits that profile, uh, I'm really amazed at how the types of businesses, the types of entrepreneurs, and the different sizes of businesses, from a solopreneur who is thinking about scaling his business up. And can a solopreneur guy that's running his own shop, can he actually sell his business if he's kind of the main person in the business? I get that question a lot, and a lot of people that have their own business and there's only one or two people in the business, but they are the primary person that is the revenue generator for the business. They have all the expertise, the core knowledge, and that's kind of what they're selling. Is there a lot of value to that business, because it's so much dependent on the individual? Can you really sell something like that? And can you have a successful exit? And I had an individual not too long ago that kind of fit that profile, and knew him personally. And he found out a little bit what I was doing, and we started talking a little bit. And he had decided that it was time for him to retire. He'd been doing this for several decades, and he'd had a successful corporate career, and he'd kind of gone out on his own. And he had built up this, very successful business where he was selling his expertise. And it was very much centered around him. And he had a great reputation, a lot of goodwill that he'd built up over time, a lot of satisfied clients. But he didn't really think that he had anything to sell because it was so much focused on him. And so he had decided to wind down or liquidate his business, just close up shop. And I found out that's what he was doing. And we got together, and he said, yeah, he was going to list, the equipment that he had. He had some specialized equipment. He was just going to list it online, going to sell off his computers and office equipment, and, he figured, maybe $20,000 or $30,000 he would get for that used equipment and stuff. And he would call it a day because he made great money. He was pretty prudent and, wise, and building, a portfolio of stocks and some real estate rental properties and stuff. And that was really going to be his retirement plan. And we were chatting about it. And I said, have you ever thought about all the kind of the intangible assets that you've created here over the last 20 years or so? He says, what do you mean, intangible assets? And I said, well, you got this great website, and you got your client list. It's like 500 clients that you have. They're loyal to you. They think a lot of what you do. That client list is going to have value to somebody. Your brand, your personal brand and website, you've spent 20 years building up your presence online. You have this reputation. All of those things, have value. They're not hard assets that you can touch and feel necessarily. They're these intangible assets. It's this goodwill that you've built. It's the brand that you've built. It's that client list that you've built, the database of people that you know and in the industry that would refer you business. And you should really think about, you know, doing something with that. And so we chatted a little bit more about it. And before you know it, we had repositioned everything he was doing. Yes, he did sell off his assets because he didn't want to be in business anymore. But we were able to go out and I hooked him up with an advisor that kind of specialized in personal services businesses. And over the next 4 or 5 months, he was able to bring people, other companies to the table that were interested in what he had, his brand, his reputation, his customer list. And he ended up monetizing all that and got between $200,000 and $300,000 for something that he thought had no value. And so he actually got 10x, from the $20,000 or $30,000 that he was thinking of getting. He got $200,000 or $300,000 for those quote intangible assets and goodwill. And so it's things like that the podcast kind of brings to fore, that you share experiences like this, where you have people that have these kind of one or two man businesses, and they've never really thought about the value they've created and what value that has. And of course, on the other side of the coin, you have companies that have been around and have lots of employees, millions of dollars in sales, and they've spent their whole career building up this business. They never really thought about what they're going to do. They're not going to live forever, and they've really never gone through the process of thinking, how does this really happen? How can I optimize this value? Can it, and how can I position it so I can get people really interested, maybe get a bunch of people interested in my business? In the last 4 or 5 years in this country, we've had kind of this emerging real estate market that's been kind of a boom economy as far as real estate goes. And you have parts of the country where people are offering multiple bids on a property, and they're bidding up the value of the property in order to actually be able to buy the property. Well, if you do the right things with your business and you position it properly, you can create that same type of environment for your business where you'll have two or three people at the table making offers on your business that actually, when they find out it's a competitive bidding situation, they'll increase their bid, or they'll change the terms. They'll increase the amount of cash they'll put down on the business. And that doesn't happen just by chance. You have to actually plan. In most cases, you actually have to plan to how to position your company to have that type of excitement and value around it. And really, some of the deal makers that I bring to the table, when they talk about the transactions of how they were able to do that, and they share with the audience and the business owners that listen to the podcast some of the things that you need to be doing to be able to increase that interest in your business, increase the value when it comes time to step away from your business. And so that's really the type of podcast. So I get people, as I said, in their 60s and older. I get people in their 20s and 30s, 40s, that are listening to the podcast, that this is kind of their first rodeo. They've never sold a business before, and so they listen to get hints and tips, and sometimes to get introduced to advisors that can help them through that process.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I guess my follow-up to that is, what are some of those things that business owners can be doing to prepare for that exit?
Well, I get that question a lot. One of the things I really didn't anticipate when I started doing the podcast was how much of a demand there is to answer just that question. What should I be doing? And so as I started getting this inbound traffic and questions that people were asking, things like that, I started, coaching and, consulting with people to help them through that process. And I really sort of identified some of the steps and things that you need to do that almost any business, regardless of the size, what they kind of need to do. And so I'm actually writing a book right now, and the book's going to be titled Pack Your Parachute. And it's really based on the metaphor of what a pilot will do. A pilot doesn't pack his parachute when his engines are on fire and he's losing altitude. He has that parachute already packed, ready to go in case there's an unexpected event. And so I've kind of used that metaphor is that business owners really start to need to think about if they had to sell their business in the next few months or next year, what would they do to prepare for that? And that's really kind of packing your parachute. And so some of the things that you need to do is, as simple as this may sound, it's amazing how many people just don't get around to the actual process of putting together a plan, putting together a thought process. In fact, there's some surveys and studies that have been done out there that entrepreneurs, 73% of entrepreneurs out there believe that business ownership and owning your own business is the fastest way for them to accumulate net worth. And statistically, people that run their own business have a net worth that's about 3.5 times greater than their counterparts that work, in the corporate world, as a general rule. So business ownership is a way to accumulate wealth. And 70% of entrepreneurs' net worth is tied up in their business. 70%. That means if you had $1 million net worth, $700,000 of that net worth is tied up into your business. And if that's the case, the other interesting statistic is that 88% of business owners, even though they believe that their business is the fastest way to accumulate net worth, 70% of their business is tied up into their business. 88% of business owners don't have a plan in place to protect that huge asset on their balance sheet. They haven't thought about how they're going to protect that net worth so that they can monetize and actually protect it when it comes time to selling that business. And so the first thing that an entrepreneur should do, a business owner should do, is get into that frame of mind that what would happen if I had to sell my business in the next few months or year? And then what type of plan would I have in place? And that's where this whole metaphor comes from of, packing your parachute. So as you're stuffing that parachute into the pack, and you're getting it packed so that it'll open when it's supposed to, there are some things that you need to really focus on. So one of the things that I generally ask an entrepreneur that's getting ready to sell his business, and he's all excited about it, and he's worked in this business for years and years, and he understands it inside out, and he has this kind of inflated idea of what his business is going to be worth. Another interesting statistic is that 59% of all businesses that don't get sold, the reason they don't get sold is because of the unrealistic expectations of the owner on what his business is worth. So they say their business is worth $1 million, but all the financial statements and everything says the business is only worth $800,000. But in mind, the entrepreneur thinks, well, I've worked hard on this business. I've had my blood, sweat, and tears into this business. It's worth $1 million. And that's what they believe they need to get for their business. But the market, people that are looking at businesses, they look at your financial statements and the metrics in there, and they say, well, it's not worth $1 million, it's worth $800,000. If you do the right things, you could probably make your business worth $1 million. And that's where the planning comes in. That's where, if you're thinking that you had to sell your business, in the next year, you start doing things that are really important. So just put yourself in the chair of a buyer. I've often asked this question to people that have had businesses. I say, if you were buying your business here today, would you write the check that you're asking for the business? Would you buy it? And I've had, people sit there and they kind of look down at their feet or at the desk and they say, that's a good question. Knowing what I know, I probably wouldn't. And yet they're asking someone else who doesn't know the business, who doesn't have the experience that they have in the business, to write that check. And so when you kind of put yourself in the buyer's chair of what they're going to need to see, and you start looking at, the business through their eyes, your perspective and attitude changes a lot. So that's kind of the process that you go through, and of getting in the right frame of mind to start getting your business ready for sale.
I love it. I love it. Well, awesome. Now we're going to jump into our thriving three. So what is your favorite book, movie, or podcast? Pick one.
Well, I'll pick a book. I just finished reading a book. It's called Premonition. It's written by Michael Lewis. I don't know if you know Michael Lewis, but he's the author that wrote Moneyball and The Wall Street Boys, and some of these recent books that come out. And he really zeroes in on kind of current events, and it's all about the pandemic and kind of the history around the vaccines that were developed for the pandemic and how they were able to develop the vaccine so quickly, and kind of the mechanics behind all this and some of the government policies, and why we didn't have kind of a more robust pandemic response. And it was just an interesting read. So that was really enjoyable since it was so topical. That's one of the book that I really enjoy, and I just finished it a few weeks ago, actually.
Awesome. What's one way you like to take care of yourself?
Well, I'm an early riser, so I'm up early, and I live, out in the country, so I get up and head out for my morning walks and hikes, and I do that virtually every day. Sometimes 3 to 4 miles, sometimes 7 to 10 miles. Just depends on what I got going for the day. But I get that heart pumping and the cardiovascular system pushing that blood through my body, and I've done that for years, and it served me well.
Love it. And what is one action step you can take or continue to take to really help entrepreneurs continue to realize the intangible assets that they have and how valuable they are for the exit?
Well, let me tell you, especially for your audience out there that has a business, I've sat in the chair of a business owner. I've wondered and scratched my head and stressed out over how I was going to make payroll the next week, not having enough money in the bank and having to scramble to make payroll. So I know the stress that's involved. And I know that after all this hard work that entrepreneurs go through to build up something, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family, you owe it to your employees to give some thought about how to protect your business when it comes time to exit, to maximize it. Don't, one of the things I've noticed about going through this process of talking to all these advisors that consult and work and facilitate the sales of businesses, one of the things I've kind of concluded is that the entrepreneurial profile of personality of people that run their own businesses is they like the challenge of doing that. They like the day-to-day excitement that comes with figuring out problems and solving problems on the fly, analyzing a problem, figuring out the solution, and then executing that solution. And there's really a rush that comes with being successful in being able to do that. They really become really, really good at doing that. And because they have experienced success in growing their business through that methodology, solving problems, overcoming problems, building, scaling, becoming bigger. Uh, they get into this frame of mind that when it comes time to sell their business, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to figure it out on the fly. When it comes time, they'll just figure it out. Unfortunately, the data doesn't support that. In fact, 80% of all businesses that are listed for sale in the next 12 months, 80% of them are not going to find a buyer. There's a lot of reasons for that, but it shouldn't be that way. Every business has a buyer out there if you do the right things to position it to make it attractive to someone out there, another company, another individual, another group. Um, but you have to actually go through that thought process of positioning it and creating the romance, creating the story around the business of why it would be a good investment, why someone should buy the investment. One of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make is that they want to grow their business and they get selfish. They get penny wise and pound foolish. They want to grow their business right up to the peak. They want to climb that mountain. And when they get right at the peak, that's when they want to sell. Well, I'll ask the question. If you were the buyer and you knew that that was the peak and you couldn't grow the business much more without a significant investment or whatever, would you buy the business? And the answer is generally no. Or if they're going to buy the business, they would give you a lower price to hedge that risk. So what you want to do is before you get to the peak, you want to sell the business when it's still climbing, when it's still growing, not when it gets right to the peak. And that's what a lot of entrepreneurs do. And that's where they have this unrealistic expectation of what their business is worth. And so the whole process of getting this. And so what I would suggest to all of your audience out there is to listen to podcasts. There's a lot of podcasts out there that talk about exits, but the Business Exit Stories podcast has so many different stories. I have literally hundreds of stories about entrepreneurs, and there's really not a business owner out there that wouldn't find something of value, a nugget, a takeaway that could really translate into a lot of money, hundreds of thousands or $1 million down the road, just by following some simple steps. So that would be my advice, is helping people to monetize all their hard work, is just to learn all the time. And the podcast that I do is a great way to do that.
I love that. I love that. Well, is there anything else you want to chat about before we sign off?
No, this has been fun. I just think that business people out there, the entrepreneurs are the backbone of this country. They employ a lot of people. They're the reason this country has become great. The reason that this country offers so much opportunity is because it allows people with talent and the ability to work hard to grow their business and make a living for themselves and their family. Just don't drop the baton on the last lap. Don't let all that hard work go to nothing because you didn't think about it or plan or position your company for someone else to pick up the baton and take it to the next level.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Marvin, thank you for coming on the show. And if you guys are listening to this and you liked what Marvin had to say, maybe you have some friends or you yourself are in a business and you need to learn about exiting, make sure to go to his podcast, and that will be in the show notes. One more time, the name of the podcast for us, Marvin.
Well, it's Business Exit Stories. You can get it wherever you get your podcast, Apple or Google or wherever. I do have a free report just on this whole concept of business exits. If people would like to get a downloadable version, PDF version of that, just go to businessexitstories.com/report2. That's the number 2, report2/2, and just download the report. It's a very quick read, 15 pages long, and it'll give you tremendous information and insights. It's something you can start thinking about. So
love it. Go grab that report, go listen to his podcast. And as we always ask, send this episode to 1 or 2 people need to hear it, preferably some entrepreneurs in your world. Connect them to Marvin and his mission and what he's trying to do to help them. Thank you guys for listening to the show. shoot us a 5-star review on iTunes. Marvin, thank you for coming on, and
It's
we're
been
out.
fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes, sir. See you guys.